Imagine standing in a place that has been a center of human activity for, well, nearly 4,000 years. Today, you're joining us as we take a deep dive into the Karnak Temple Complex in Luxor, Egypt. It's just this sprawling, really awe-inspiring site that was once the very heart of ancient Thebes.
Yeah, and what's fascinating, especially if you're thinking about a visit, is realizing Karnak isn't, just one temple. It's this vast, almost bewildering mix of individual temples, those massive gates they call pylons, chapels, and all sorts of other buildings. It really shows the incredibly long history of this place being sacred.
Okay, so let's try and get a handle on this timeline. Construction kicked off way back, around 1970 BC, during the Middle Kingdom, under Sanusret I.
That's right. And it wasn't like a single project. It just kept going. Building continued for millennia, actually, right into the Ptolemaic Kingdom, which wraps up around 30 BC.
Wow. But most of what you'd actually see if you went there today, that's mainly from the New Kingdom period, right?
Mostly, yeah. And to connect that for someone maybe planning a trip, Thebes wasn't always the big capital, It really grew in importance around the 11th dynasty, so the earliest temple building at Karnak. Probably pretty small. Likely early shrines dedicated to Montu, who was the original local god there in Thebes.
And it's interesting, for anyone who really likes the details, the earliest actual artifact they found in the temple area is this small 8-sided column. It's from that 11th dynasty, and get this, it already mentions Amun-Re.
Which makes you wonder what else might have been there early on. Lost to time, maybe, or buried under later stuff.
Exactly.
And this brings up the site's ancient name. The Egyptians called this area Ipet Isit.
Ipet Isit, how do you say that roughly?
Something like Ipet Isidot, and it means basically the most selected of places.
The most selected of places, okay.
Yeah, and what's insightful is that name seems to have first applied just to the central bit, the precinct of Amun-Re. And its use also dates back to the 11th dynasty, so that suggests some kind of temple was there even before the big Middle Kingdom expansion you see evidence of today.
Right. So look, if you're dreaming of maybe exploring Egypt's ancient wonders firsthand someday, or you're just fascinated by the history, well, this deep dive is definitely for you. Our mission today is to give you a concise, but hopefully really engaging overview of Karnak's incredible history. We want to highlight some absolute must-see structures.
Yeah, the highlights.
And share some genuinely interesting facts to, spark your curiosity and really help you appreciate the sheer grandeur if you do get to visit.
And what's fascinating for a potential visitor is thinking about how that, relatively modest early temple turned into this huge state religious center. It happened as Egypt got wealthier and more powerful, especially during the New Kingdom, starting around 1550 BC. Pretty much every single pharaoh of the 18th dynasty added something to it. They were all leaving their mark, writing their own chapter, basically.
That's right. Like Amenhotep I, he built a bark shrine, one of those special boat shrines, a gateway. Then you get Thutmose, who put up an enclosure wall around that original Middle Kingdom temple, connecting the 4th and 5th pylons. These are actually the oldest parts of the temple, still standing where they were originally built.
Right, and inside that area, you would have found 14 papyrus columns and those really famous twin obelisks of Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut's obelisks. Though Thutmose III later built walls that kind of hid them, didn't he?
He did, yes. In Thutmose II, he started a festival courtyard, but later building sort of wiped it out, unfortunately. Although they have found blocks from it reused inside the 3rd pylon, which gives us clues about what it looked like.
Fascinating how things get recycled. And then Hatshepsut and Thutmose III, they also built another fortified wall with towers. And the sacred lake nearby, that big pool you see, it's thought it was either built or made much bigger during their time too. Shows how important water rituals were becoming.
Absolutely. But the expansion just kept going.
Oh.
Under Thutmose III, the main temple grew by like 50%. He added a building called the Akhmenu.
Akhmenu. What does that translate to?
Well, often it's the most glorious of monuments, but another idea is monument to living spirit. Today, we usually call it the Festival Hall of Thutmose III. And its decoration is really unique. It seems designed to look like a giant tent shrine.
A tent shrine. Like made of stone, but looking like a tent.
Exactly. Complete with carvings that look like awnings and tent poles. It gives you a sense of maybe temporary structures they used for earlier festivals.
Huh. And this festival hall, it also has something important inside, right? The king list.
Yes, the Karnak king list. It shows Thutmose III with some of the earlier kings who built at Karnak. It's like a history book carved right into the wall, showing the pharaoh's lineage and connection to the place.
Okay, so after the brief Amarna period with Akhenaten moving the capital, construction picks back up at Karnak.
It does under Tutankhamun and Horemheb. And notably, the ninth pylon, which you can still see, it's down on the southern axis. It was built using recycled material, those famous Talatat blocks.
Ah, the Talatat from Akhenaten's dismantled city, Akhenaten.
Exactly. It's almost, well, ironic, isn't it? A pharaoh tries to erase his predecessor, and those very stones become part of later monuments.
Wow. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's zoom in on some of the absolute key things you'd see inside the precinct of Amun-Re, that main central area, if we were walking through today. The first thing that hits you is that incredible avenue of the sphinxes, right?
Yes, the main entranceway. A path lined with these sphinx statues. But they're not human-headed. They have ram heads, which represent the god Amun. And look closely, beneath each ram's head, there's a little statue of Ramses II.
Oh, cool detail. And this avenue, it originally went somewhere else.
It led to the second pylon originally, but its path had to be moved when they built the first pylon later on. You can sort of trace the change in the layout.
And speaking of pylons, that first pylon is just huge.
Yeah.
Colossal. How wide is it?
It's massive, 113 meters wide and about 15 meters thick.
Whoa. But here's the surprise, maybe for your visit. It was never actually finished.
That's right. You can still see the mud bricks piled up against the inside walls. They give us clues about how they built these things using ramps. And this huge pylon, mostly plain, unadorned, was built quite late during the Ptolemaic era.
So you pass through that unfinished giant gate and you're in the forecourt.
Yeah. And this area is interesting because building that first pylon back in the 22nd dynasty actually enclosed some older structures that were already there. That's why they had to reroute the Sphinx Avenue.
Ah, makes sense. And what can you still see in there from earlier times?
You can spot some boat shrines and also the kiosk of Taharqa. They give you glimpses into earlier phases. Those shrines probably held the sacred boats, the barks, used to carry the god statues during festivals. Really shows how important those processions were.
But okay, the absolute showstopper inside Karnak arguably has got to be the Great Hypostyle Hall.
Oh, absolutely. Started by Seti II, finished by his son Ramesses II. Just imagine stepping into this. Well, it feels like a stone forest. 134 giant sandstone columns. Some are 20 meters tall.
20 meters? That's like a 6 or 7 story building.
Easily. And they're all holding up a clerestory roof. That's a raised central section with openings high up to let light filter down into this vast space. The hall itself covers a whole acre. It's immense.
An acre of columns.
Yeah.
And everything's covered in carvings, right?
Every single surface, the walls, the columns, even the roof pieces, it's covered in inscriptions, relief sculptures, stories from different periods, like a giant 3D history book.
Wow. And get this. Those 12 central columns, they're even bigger. They have these capitals shaped like open papyrus flowers.
Yeah, the open papyrus capitals.
And they are so massive, it said 100 men could stand on top of just one of them.
It's incredible. And the columns themselves are designed to look like papyrus stalks. They even have these slight ridges carved into them.
So much detail. Now, the walls have different styles of carving, don't they? Seti I versus Ramesses II.
That's a key thing to notice. If you look closely, Seti I inscribed the northern wing, his section, using raised relief. His battle scenes are carved sticking out from the wall. Ramesses II finished the southern wing. He started in raised relief too, but then switched to sump relief, where the images are carved into the stone.
Why the switch?
Good question. Maybe faster, maybe cheaper, maybe just a change in style. But he even went back and had some of his father's raised reliefs recarved into sunk relief. And of course, Ramesses II added his own name, his cartouches everywhere, really making his mark.
Asserting his presence. And the outer walls, they're like giant storyboards too.
Very much so. Huge battle scenes. Seti I's victories are shown on the north side, Ramesses II's campaigns on the south, and the south wall also has something incredibly important historically. The inscription of Ramesses II's peace treaty with the Hittites. Actual ancient diplomacy carved in stone.
Amazing. Okay, so beyond the Hypostyle Hall, the temple is divided up by more pylons.
Yes, the Temple of Amun proper is defined by 6 main pylons, these huge walls and gates. They divide the complex into different courts and sections. And then there's the southern extension, sometimes called the Propylaea of the South, which includes the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th pylons.
And here's another recycling factoid to look out for, right? Horemheb used those Talatat blocks again.
He did. When building those later southern pylons, particularly the 9th, He used thousands of recycled blocks. Not just the teletot from Akhenaten, but even pieces from a temple built by Tutankhamun and I. They used them as filler inside the core of the pylon towers.
Wow. Literally burying the past within the new structures. Which is great for archaeologists now, I suppose.
Exactly. It preserved material that would otherwise be lost. Oh, and also the roof of the second pylon actually collapsed way back in ancient times. It was restored later, during the Ptolemaic period.
Karnak was also famous for its obelisks, wasn't it? Huge single pillars of stone.
Immense ones. At least 17 massive obelisks originally stood there, put up by different pharaohs. And they weren't just decoration. Inscriptions suggest people actually prayed directly to them, maybe saw them as images of the divine king. Sadly, only 2 are still standing at Karnak today. Gives you just a hint of their original impact.
And Hatshepsut's were particularly impressive.
Hugely ambitious. She put up twin obelisks, the tallest in the world at that time. One of hers is still standing. It's the second tallest ancient obelisk still surviving anywhere. Its twin, unfortunately, fell down and broke. A powerful reminder of time and, well, earthquakes, probably.
And some of these obelisks really traveled, didn't they?
They certainly did. Think about this. One of Thutmose III's obelisks was moved by a Roman emperor all the way to Alexandria, and then later it was taken to Constantinople, which is modern Istanbul. It's still standing there today, in the Hippodrome.
Incredible journey. And Thutmose III also put up a unique single giant obelisk.
That's right, another one of his distinctions.
Okay, also near the main temple, there's the Sacred Lake.
Yes, a large rectangular lake. And interestingly, recent digs have found evidence of, houses and workshops, domestic areas just to the east of it. It suggests a whole community lived right there, supporting the temple, working there, probably taking part in the rituals.
Right, makes sense. And we should also mention the Festival Hall of Thutmose III again, the Ak menu.
Definitely. It not only made the temple much bigger, but had that unique tent shrine decoration. And as we said, it contains that really important Karnak king list, crucial for figuring out the temple's history.
And beyond the sixth pylon, there's more.
Yes, further in you find the sanctuary of Philip Aridaeus. He was Alexander the Great's successor. It shows Karnak was still important even after the main pharaonic periods. And really important for visitors interested in how things changed, there's the open-air museum.
Oh yeah, what's in there?
It's in the northwest corner. They've done amazing work reconstructing earlier buildings from pieces they found reused in later structures, like Hatshepsut's Chapelle Rouge, her red chapel, and the beautiful white chapel of Sanusret I. These were dismantled and used as filler in pylons, basically preserving them in fragments for us to rebuild.
Like a giant historical jigsaw puzzle.
Pretty much.
Now, Karnak isn't just the main Amun-Re precinct, is it? There are other areas.
Correct. While Amun-Re's precinct is the biggest and most famous, there are other important ones nearby. To the south, you have the precinct of Mut, dedicated to Amun's wife, the goddess Mut. Over time, Mut kind of absorbed other goddesses, like the lioness Sekhmet and the cat goddess Bast. Shows how beliefs could merge. And there's even evidence, some say, of a festival there that involved, shall we say, deliberate overindulgence in alcohol.
A party precinct. And to the north.
To the north is the precinct of Montu, dedicated to that older original god of Thebes we mentioned. Records say Amenhotep III's obelisks, which are now gone, once stood in this area.
Okay. And we also have to mention Akhenaten's temple again, briefly.
Yes, the temple of Amenhotep IV, which is Akhenaten's name before he changed it. He built his own temple complex to his god, the Aten, at Karnak. But after his reign, during the reaction against his religious changes, it was deliberately torn down. And its distinctive small blocks, the talatat, were then reused all over Karnak and later buildings. You see them everywhere if you know what to look for.
Such a layered history. Now, thinking about the sheer scale of all this.
Yeah.
The construction must have been mind-boggling. How did they move those huge stones?
It's truly impressive to think about, especially for anyone visiting. They likely used enormous ramps made of, different materials, sand, mud brick, maybe stone rubble, and they would have towed the stones up these ramps, maybe on sledges, possibly over prepared surfaces, perhaps using rollers. Some theories suggest wooden tracks or even cobblestones near the top to reduce friction.
And lifting the lintels, those massive horizontal stones on top of the columns. The architraves.
Yeah, that's another puzzle. Maybe using levers, painstakingly inching them up. It would have been incredibly slow and required amazing balance and coordination. Huge amounts of manpower, obviously.
And the carvings on the columns. They did those after the columns were up.
It seems so. The final detailed carving on the tiller drums was likely done once they were stacked in place. probably to avoid damaging the delicate reliefs during the heavy lifting and positioning process.
Smart. Now, Karnak's story doesn't end with the pharaohs, does it? What happened later?
No, its history continued but changed. During the Christian period and later under Muslim rule, these ancient temples, seen as pagan sites, were often neglected. Sadly, sometimes their stone was even taken, recycled for new buildings. It was a ready-made quarry in some ways. But it's also important to note some temples, including parts of Karnak itself, were actually converted into churches. So there was a kind of continuity of sacred space, just repurposed.
And it's weird to think that Europeans actually lost track of where Thebes was, isn't it? Despite ancient writers describing it.
It is quite remarkable. Writers like Herodotus and Strabo wrote about it, and maps based on Ptolemy's Geographia from the Roman era showed Thebes. But in medieval Europe, the exact location seems to have become fuzzy. Some early maps or travelers in the 15th, 16th centuries even put Thebes near Memphis, much further north.
So when did Europeans sort of rediscover Karnak?
Well, the first drawing we have in a European travel account is from 1704 by a guy named Paul Lucas. Though it was apparently pretty inaccurate, it really wasn't until the 18th and especially the 19th centuries that European travelers and scientists started visiting and describing it properly. Napoleon's expedition to Egypt was a key moment. The scholars with him produced detailed descriptions and, crucially, accurate drawings that started to reveal Karnak's true scale and complexity to the West.
Thank goodness for preservation efforts today, though. There's a Franco-Egyptian center working there.
Yes, thankfully. In modern times, there's been a huge effort. The Centre Franco-Egyptien d'études des Temples de Karnak, CEETK for short, was set up in 1967. Their job is basically to oversee the recording, study, and preservation of the whole complex.
And what kind of work do they do? Is it ongoing?
Oh, absolutely ongoing. If you visit, you'll likely see work happening. They undertake tons of projects. Reconstruction work, like putting back together Hatshepsut's Chapelle Rouge or the Hall of Thutmose V in the Open Air Museum. They've also been involved in discovering those domestic areas we mentioned, learning about the ordinary people connected to the temple, and just continuous detailed study of different parts of the temple, recording inscriptions, analyzing architecture, constantly adding to what we know.
It's truly amazing. Even after all this time, all this study, there's still ongoing excavation, ongoing research. Huge parts of this incredible place are still undocumented, still holding secrets.
Absolutely, waiting to be unearthed for future generations.
So, just to kind of wrap up our deep dive today, Karnak really stands as this incredible, enduring testament to ancient Egypt's power, its religious beliefs, its sheer ingenuity. It's a place built and added to over, nearly 2,000 years by so many different rulers. Each one left their mark.
Yeah, creating this breathtakingly complex historical record, literally carved in stone. It's just layer upon layer of history.
From the unbelievable scale of that Great Hypostyle Hall to those towering obelisks reaching for the sky. And even in the hidden stories, like those reused blocks we talked about, Karnak just offers this completely unique window into the past. You can literally walk through history there.
Which brings up maybe a final thought for you to consider, especially if you're thinking about making the trip. Just try to imagine the sheer scale of human effort, the unwavering devotion needed to build something this immense without any modern technology. What must it have felt like? For a pilgrim, say, entering a tipis suit thousands of years ago, surrounded by all the bright paint we forget it was painted, the huge statues, the imposing presence of their gods.
Wow, yeah, that's something to ponder. So, if you find yourself drawn to exploring ancient civilizations, to seeing these architectural marvels yourself, well, we absolutely encourage you to think about a visit to Karnak. And whether you actually get to go in person, or maybe you continue exploring through books, documentaries, online, just remember that Karnak is still an unfolding story. New discoveries are still being made. So maybe think about it. What part of Karnak's incredible history or its awe-inspiring architecture has sparked your curiosity to learn more and maybe, just maybe, go see it for yourself?